So I will talk about open questions and research directions. And in particular, I'll talk about artificial intelligence and marginal value of data. So the format of this session is a little bit different from previous sessions. There's no discussant since there are a lot of open questions here. I figured maybe I will get some more questions or give some more answers. So instead of a discussant, we'll have more time for questions that I will actually have time to answer. So let me first start with somewhat of a rhetorical question. Is AI like no other labor-saving technology? And here's a quote that I really like, that I think really captures what AI revolution is all about. The epoch that began early in the century and an analysis of its latest manifestation in economic order in which knowledge and not labor or raw materials or capital is the key resource, right? So this is really, in some sense, the essence of modernity. Once you have knowledge, well, you know, the clay is plentiful and you can build anything out of it, including humans. We are clay and water. So wonderful quote, really captures what AI is all about, except that it has nothing to do with AI. It's from Peter Drucker, 1994. So actually, it's not about this century, it's about the previous century. And it's obviously not about AI. So, so this is certainly not what makes AI unique. So it's difficult to overestimate importance of AI, but it should not stop us from trying. So from economic point of view, I really think that there is so that AI is not unlike other major technological innovations. What makes AI really different is that from philosophical point of view, it is like no other technology because it does something that we would normally attribute to humans and will not expect pieces of capital to play chess. So this being said, it's just a labor technology, like a labor-saving technology like any other. It's just that philosophical implications are very different. And of course, I would like to remind all of you that you are doctors of philosophy, so it does matter. So, big open question about AI. Where will productivity gains go? And there are at least 4 candidates. Obviously, productivity gains could go to consumers. They may see lower prices. Productivity gains could go to employees, who are also consumers. They may see higher wages. Productivity gains may go to capital owners because they need to use less labor. Capital may become more productive, more intensively used. Productivity gains could go to purveyors of AI technologies. And those might be either established firms or new startups that are yet to emerge. And finally, those productivity gains may simply be dissipated. For example, here's a wonderful application of AI. A health insurance company may use AI technology in order to evaluate every claim that's being submitted and to write a long, extensive rejection letter for the claim completely automatically with no labor involved whatsoever. At that point, a consumer of, a customer of that health insurance companies will do well by hiring his own AI-based solution that would reply to that automatically generated letter explaining why the claim is still valid and disputing it. And it could go on and on. It's called an arms race. And in fact, a lot of transactions in our economy, in fact, almost all of them, are partially adversarial. That's what the market is about. When A and B transact with each other, they both want transaction to happen, but there are also the terms of the transaction, and on the terms, it's a zero-sum game. I want a bigger share of the pie. You want a bigger share of the pie. We do both want the pie to be bigger. So AI may be used to basically try to capture bigger share of the pie, and if everybody tries to do it, it kind of becomes a zero-sum game, and we just dissipate some of those rents. So where would that gain go? So let me make 2 points, and one of them is obvious, and the other is slightly less obvious. So the obvious point is that it's a completely imaginable story. And by the way, I'm not making a claim that this is true. I'm just saying, hypothetically, this is possible. It's completely imaginable that almost all the gains from AI will be captured by consumers and employees. Not by purveyors of AI technologies, not by capital owners, but by us, the people. How could it happen? Well, it's very simple. AI could quite easily become a commodity. Anybody could create AI technology. It's easy to copy. It's easy to replicate. Whatever was state of the art 10 years ago, a graduate student could put together right now in 6 months. So you can easily imagine that purveyors of AI technology don't make a boatload of money because they compete with each other. You can easily imagine that all the firms, all the capital owners, they get to use that AI. It makes them tremendously more productive, but they compete with each other, so they simply have to lower prices. And as a result, well, who captures all the gains? Well, consumers and employees. Is it imaginable? Yes. Would it happen this way? Well, certainly 100% of the gains are not going to be captured by consumers. But I think there's certainly a plausible argument that consumers will get and employees will get a disproportionate share of the gains. That's quite possible. So now let me make another argument. So I think there are a lot of politicians whose heads are exploding as they think about the possibility of AI replacing massive number of workers. So what would happen with the economy if that were to happen? Well, that's a complicated question, but let me ask you a simpler question to which I know the answer. I love asking questions to which I know answers. What will happen if everybody were to become twice as productive as they are today? Maybe not over time, maybe over a period of time, but let's imagine we all became twice as productive. And to make things better, the capital also becomes twice as productive. Everything doubles. So that couldn't be a bad thing. So now, with a new efficient frontier, what we could afford, we could all afford to consume double of what we're consuming before. 2 steaks for dinner instead of 1. 24 pairs of underwear instead of 12. Double the size of the closet and double the number of shirts. And the list goes on and on. That's feasible, but we know it's not going to happen in equilibrium. So is what's going to happen in equilibrium going to be better, or is it going to be worse? And is it going to be better for capital owners? Is it going to be better for workers? And here, actually, I think I know the answer. And the answer is the labor share. So if everything doubles and we simply consume double of everything, then obviously labor share stays the same by definition. But in equilibrium, labor share will not stay the same. Will go up or down. And we know the answer to that. You may need to think about it for a minute in order to figure out the answer. But you know the answer somewhere deep in your heart. And the answer is the labor share will go up, not down. Why would that be? Well, because we know, and of course we need to double check the numbers, but that's an empirical fact we can double check. We know that when incomes go up, the marginal dollar is being spent on products that are more labor intensive than average products. Which means that in a general equilibrium setting, there would be a little bit of a relative increase in the demand for labor and a relative decrease in the demand for capital. Because as you become wealthier, demand for services increases faster than demand for goods, and services are labor intensive. expensive. That ain't rocket science. So of course you can do a lot better than that. You can actually use the wonderful machinery and wonderful data that Eric presented yesterday, and you can actually do much more granular things when you can say we can actually predict. We don't have to use this naive model where I say everybody's productivity doubles. We can actually see industry by industry what would be the likely impact of AI on productivity there based on kind of how replaceable things are there. And we can also observe what's the income elasticity of demand for different goods. And from there, you can actually make reasonable prediction about what would happen with the labor share. But that super crude exercise that I propose suggests that actually labor share should go up. Okay, moving on. Oops. So one thing that I think is really striking about AI is that from technical point of view, AI is already an incredible triumph of mankind. And I would like to just pause for 60 seconds and celebrate that fact. Because I don't think we done enough of that at that conference. So when I was a teenager in the 80s, I was always interested in AI. And the questions that I pondered, and admittedly I wasn't a typical teenager, the questions that I pondered were questions like, would a computer ever play chess better than a human? Would a computer ever be able to recognize handwriting? Would a computer ever be able to transcribe speech? Would a computer be able to recognize objects and tell a difference between a cat and a desk? Or would a computer be able to tell a difference between a cat and a picture of a cat? And at that time, the answer to those questions seemed like maybe to some of those one day, probably not in our lifetime, maybe some of them in our lifetime. And here today, we didn't even notice that just this year, 2018, Microsoft translation technology from Chinese into English, and that is, Chinese is the most spoken language on earth. It's a very important language. For the first time ever, translation technology reached human parity. That's freaking incredible. I would have bet dollar for donuts against it 30 years ago when I was a teen. I'm glad I didn't make that bet. Fortunately, I was a minor, so probably the courts wouldn't honor that bet anyway. But it's a really good thing I didn't bet, because I would have bet like 1 to 100. That would never ever happen, and it just did, right? So, and many other amazing things happen. All those things that I mentioned, most of them are on human parity already. So, for example, speech-to-text recognition is currently current technology, human parity for low noise environments. There's still no human parity for high background noise environments, but it's incredible. It's just a triumph beyond belief. How about the business of AI? Well, that haven't quite happened yet. It's just the beginning. But what we see is that, at least for now, on a macroeconomic level, the productivity growth due to AI is significantly smaller than the measurement error. I don't believe we can truly detect, on an aggregate level, increase in productivity due to AI. So that hasn't happened yet. How about the business of AI? Are large companies like Microsoft, like Google, like IBM, are those companies making a killing selling AI? And the answer is no. Actually, nobody is making a fortune in AI. And we do sell a lot of AI services. For example, Microsoft has wonderful cognitive services where there are APIs that could do translation, that could transcribe speech, that could do many other amazing things. Those APIs are not very expensive. Anybody can use them. A lot of people do use them. Is it a huge moneymaker for us? No. Is AI a huge moneymaker for Google? No. Is AI a huge moneymaker for anybody? Well, maybe there are some smaller startups that make an okay living with AI. But no, it's not a Microsoft-sized business yet. That's kind of remarkable. This amazing technological triumph, but not a business triumph yet. So how AI, so one big question, a big open question, what will emerge as a dominant business model for AI? What is it going to be like? So currently, a common business model is you sell an API. You say, look, we will have this service. You can send a request. We'll do something that request, and we will send you something back, and you'll pay us for each request. And that's how Microsoft services, cognitive services work. That's how many Google AI APIs work. So it's a business. Some people are buying it. It's certainly not a huge business right now. It might become a huge business one day. So the question is this business model of selling AI through APIs, is it a sustainable business model? Is it a good business model? And one observation that I would like to share is that an API that works perfectly will likely become a commodity. So what do I mean by API that works perfectly? Well, it's very clear what I mean by that. For example, if you have speech-to-text, an API that does speech-to-text, an API that works perfectly basically means API that, for all practical purposes, does a perfect job transcribing things. And we are very close to it right now, basically. Low noise environment, it is perfect. Why should it become a commodity? Well, the answer is very simple. If one company figured something out, other companies could figure it out too. Something that was very hard 10 years ago is very easy for everybody today. So if it's a perfect API, very, very quickly, competition kicks in. So there is no monopoly on AI technology. So is the data the strategic asset? Is the data what will prevent, what will create some market power for AI? And the answer is sometimes, sometimes not. It's complicated, and it's something that we as economists should try to understand better. So let me make a couple of observations. So is data, is data the most important strategic asset? Well, is data scarce like gas, or is it plentiful like water? Well, first one observation. A baby creates his eye using surprisingly small amount of data. 2 video cameras, 2 mics, 2 ears, and you learn image recognition, speech recognition, and lots of other stuff. So it's a shockingly small amount of data is enough. So AI right now tends to be much more data thirsty than humans. Will it stay this way? For example, you look at AlphaGo, the first version was extremely, extremely data hungry, using all the games that were ever played. The second version used no data whatsoever, just the rules of the game. So it wasn't data hungry at all. So that's certainly a big question, how data hungry AI of the future would be. For tasks that AI can do perfectly, marginal value of data is likely to be very, very low. So the bottom line, it is a certainty that data leads to first mover advantage. And the first mover advantage brings to more data. So there's this virtuous cycle. But by itself, it's probably not sufficient to prevent commodification of AI in the long run. Because in the long run, everybody catches up. So this I will skip. So data can cause monopolization of technology for autonomous vehicles. Why? Well, the answer is, so first couple of normative questions here. Should vendors of AV technologies be required to share accident data? So one interesting observation, FAA already requires airlines to share all the data about near accident situations. So is there any rationale for car makers not to be subject to the same requirement? And a little bit food for thought, I would like to finish with a multiple choice quiz. So here's the data to die for. What will be the number of miles per fatality for future autonomous vehicles? Who votes for answer A? Who wants for answer B? Who wants for answer C? Who wants for answer D? So this is the correct answer. When the first commercially available AVs will appear, they will have roughly one fatality per 100 million miles. How do I know that? Currently, there are about 85 million miles per fatality. So 10 million miles is a non-starter. Nobody would let those guys on the road, and nobody would want to wait till 1 billion. So that's where it's going to be. And driving is not something that anybody could ever do perfectly. There would always be fatalities. So whoever has this accident data that's extremely rare, it takes 100 million miles to get one, would get a huge advantage. So unless that data is regulated and everybody gets even access to it, we are going to have a big problem there. So I'll skip that.